All right, first of all, what is fear? We all know the word. We have an idea about what it is. I just happened to look it up in a dictionary, and this is what I saw. A distressing emotion aroused by impending danger, evil, pain, etc., whether the threat is real or imagined. Now that's fine. I don't mind it. I'm not saying this is the only or perfect definition. But what I'm reading here is there's this element of impending danger, evil, risk. Well, let's call it that, risk. But the second part is what I think really matters here, is whether the threat is real or imagined. It's true that we have a biological function within our body to perceive what happens around us. We see things, we smell things, we remember things, we can recognize threat often when it comes to us. The question is, do we always recognize threat appropriately or not? And so we have, of course, this habit where, past results kind of influence our future predictions, right? So if the stock market's been going up, 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 everyone expects it to go up tomorrow. If it goes down, 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 everyone expects it to go down tomorrow. And so we have a perception of what is going to come to us based on what's recently been happening to us. That's quite natural. It's part of how our brain functions. But a question for us to remember is that really real or is it imagined? Because we can be in the fear experience and the fear response, whether the threat is actually real or not. Right? You could be standing on the edge of a cliff, and if the wind came a little bit, it could push you over the cliff. That's perhaps a real threat. But the threat of other things that we may perceive, like someone might say something bad about you that might damage your reputation, you really have no idea whether that would happen or not. But you could go around spending your whole life always worried about what other people might say about you that might harm your reputation. And generally, when we think about risk, we're thinking about things that we hold dear to us, like money, relationships, our place in a group or membership. So like as a respected member of the industry, for example, our reputation matters to us. And things that we think might endanger these things can obviously elicit the fear response. Now, we should remember that from a scientific point of view, there's stimulus and there's response. Stimulus is the circumstances or situation that's right in front of us. The response is our response to it. But between the stimulus and response, there's a space. And that's the space where we interpret the circumstances that are around us. And that's where sometimes the fear can pop up for us. If we imagine that there is a threat to us based on the circumstances that are surrounding us right now, it's quite likely that we're going to experience fear, and that might change our particular response. So when we're thinking about fear, if we want to understand fear a little bit better, we need to understand not only that it's influenced by a perception that's either accurate or perhaps just imagined. There's another element, which is how prominent fear is in different situations. We tend to underestimate when it exists. If I ask you, are you fearful? You say, no, I'm not fearful. Well, what if I were to say, do you ever use these words to describe yourself? Anxious, nervous, worried, or cautious. You might say, yeah, I'm not fearful. I'm not afraid. Yeah, sometimes I get nervous. Sometimes I get anxious. Guess what? That's fear. These are different words that we use for a mild experience of fear. It may be real, may be imagined, that doesn't matter. The point here is that when we are experiencing anxiousness, when we are experiencing nervousness, when we're experiencing caution or choosing caution, we're actually acting partially as a response to an interpretation of fear, a fear-based interpretation of circumstance. Not just these words, here are some more. When we're apprehensive, frightened, threatened, insecure, uneasy, or intimidated. These are also all words for fear. And that's not all either. Here are some more. Shocked, panicky, frantic, fearful, petrified, scared, stiff, horrified, terrified. You can see the words on the left are quite mild. They represent a mild experience of fear. The ones in the middle, a little bit stronger than that. And the ones to the right, a more severe experience of fear. And so when I'm talking about fear, I'm not just talking about the words that are on the right. We might describe ourselves once in a while as petrified or frantic or horrified. I'm talking about all of the ones in this page, even being just a little anxious or just a little nervous. And so part of understanding the role of fear in our lives is to understand that any of these words that ever describe us are part of fear being in our life. And I can tell you, I've met some agents and some other people that I've coached who are anxious 24/7, year after year after year after year, or nervous 24/7. What percentage of your time are you anxious or in anxiety? What percentage of your time are you nervous? That's a good indicator of your relationship with fear. If you say, I'm anxious every day, doesn't matter what day it is, doesn't matter what month it is, doesn't matter what year it is, fear is playing a significant role in your life. If you say, I get nervous a lot, fine, perfectly natural, perfectly human, but not everybody's in the same place with that, right? Some people are never anxious or never nervous. Some people always are. Most people are somewhere in between. And so your relationship with fear includes your being aware that you are any of these things at any given moment in time. Doesn't mean you're always fearful. No, what I'm asking you to be clear about is what percentage of my time is there some element of anxiousness? Is there some element of nervousness, some element of insecurity? Defensiveness. We hear sometimes people talk about someone talking and having some kind of a conflict in a story or in a situation, or someone's challenging someone else in the office and somebody gets defensive. That's fear. Defensiveness is our desire to protect ourselves or armor ourselves against some kind of personal attack. It's not a physical attack. It could be a verbal attack, or it could be something that threatens something that we value, like our business or our reputation or our membership in the family or something like that. In all these cases, fear is active to some degree. And so being aware of the role of fear in our life means understanding when any of these things is true for us. And if you do conclude that you're in some level of fear, according to these words, 5% of the time, 10% of the time, 20% of the time, 30% of the time, 50% of the time, then you're helping yourself understand better what your relationship with fear is. Let's continue. How do you manage fear? Well, I'm going to just share about 10 different things. If you go online, you'll find countless articles on how to manage fear. There's countless books on how to manage fear. There are TED Talks by the thousands on how to manage fear. And I'm not here to tell you which one of those is the right approach for you, because this is a highly personal response. How do you manage your fear? That's really up to you to decide, because what works for one person won't work for another. But I pulled a bunch off of different resources, and I'm just putting them on a list here just as prompts for you to think about. Now, you'll notice some of these are Band-Aids. That is, they are techniques that you can use in the moment to help you get through a difficult moment where you're fearful. Others are more like long-term strategies to be able to avoid that fear happening in the first place. So let's take a look. Evaluate risks, face your fears, create an action plan, etc. Evaluate risks is all about understanding whether that the risk that we perceive is really significant or not, and being able to accurately assess the significance or severity of that risk. Facing your fears is a significant element of emotional intelligence that argues for, instead of trying to push your feelings down and push them out of the way and put them under the rug and hope that they disappear, actually to lean into them and to force yourself to experience them more deeply and more directly. And through doing that, you gain insight into what the experience is like for you and where it's coming from. Creating an action plan. An action plan is a simple way to create some kind of a reasonable response to whatever the situation is. Often when we feel fearful, we feel powerless. But if we can understand where the fear is coming from and how we might respond to the situation that's in front of us, have a plan, of course, it makes it much easier to deal with. Learn to trust yourself, breathe. There's articles out there that'll show you how to breathe from your stomach, and it's kind of comes out of an Eastern an East Asian or Asian tradition or Middle Eastern tradition about breathing and the value of using breathing to shift your human experience in the moment. And of course, talk about it with somebody else. So often the things that we fear are just a dialogue in our head going around and around and around. Having one person that we could talk with sometimes helps us at least just get it out of our own head. Here are a bunch more. Spend time with someone special. When circumstances are against you, like many people perceive in the market today, one of the things you can do is just say, you know what? I'm not going to spend the next hour of my life worrying. I'm going to spend the next hour of my life sitting down for a cup of coffee with someone who matters to me. That's a better use of my time than sitting there and worrying. Visit nature. Nature has been seen by many to help us deal with the stresses of everyday life. And there's tons of studies that show people who get out in nature, even if it's just to go for a walk in a park, can actually shift the experience that they're having inside their brain. Identify your triggers. What is it that puts you in a space of fear? What's behind all that? Focus on the present. Many people worry about the future. You know, there's an old saying, if you're in regret, you're in the past. If you're in fear, you're in the future. And if you're at peace, you're in the present moment. And Buddhism and some other traditions focus a lot on staying focused on the present moment, because actually we don't really have access to the future. We don't have access to the past. We only have access to the present. And many people find activities like fishing or gardening or something like that quite soothing and relaxing, because it's easy to focus 100% on what you're doing, and everything else that might be in your mind, some of which is worrying you, seems to disappear for that period of time. Challenge your thoughts. This is a huge one. The feeling that we feel of fear is a response to the thoughts that we have between stimulus and response. Remember, between stimulus and response, there's a space. And in that space is a bunch of thoughts and a bunch of feelings. And they tend to influence each other. You create some kind of an interpretation and a dialogue of what's going on around you. That's the stimulus. And that puts you into some kind of a state. Maybe it's calm and relaxed. Maybe it's fearful or nervous. So challenging your thoughts can help you recognize whether it's really reasonable for you to feel a level of fear or not. Find a creative outlet. Maybe painting pictures is another example, for example, besides fishing or gardening. Give to others, volunteer. This is another one that many people have said, you know what, in a difficult world where I'm saddened and worried about what all the future terrible things are that could happen to me, many people derive tremendous value in the moment from simply making that moment something about something bigger than themselves. Or have an empowering mantra. You know, a lot of people have a mantra as a simple Band-Aid to get through a difficult moment. So, for example, some people might say, God would never give me a challenge that I can't overcome. Or some people might say, anything that doesn't kill me only makes me stronger. Or whatever's happening now is not going to matter 10 minutes from now or a month from now or something like that. Many of us have some kind of a mantra like that that's helped us get through one difficult situation or another. If you have one, sometimes it's helpful to remember that. So these are just a few of the many, many things that we could do that might help us get through the experience that we have, and to prevent us from having fear play a disempowering role in our lives going forwards. Now, I don't intend to imply that these are better than any other suggestions out there. It's just examples for us to explore today. So here's the success principle, and this is the point, is fear is an element in your life, and it always will be. But your relationship with fear can shift. You can shift your relationship over time. Why should you do that? Because everything that you want is on the other side of fear. So if you've been keeping track of all of our agent success principles up to now, here's the sixth one. You can fill in number 6 today. Everything you want is on the other side of fear. We fear to make calls because we think people will say, well, who are you? And, we fear to call somebody who's already in our CRM because we're afraid they won't remember us. Or we're afraid to call people that kind of know us because we don't want to sound salesy. And so we don't make calls. Or maybe we're afraid to try some new marketing thing because it's going to cost some money and we're not sure whether it's going to work or not. So we're fearful to do it. Or maybe we'd like to start a farm, but we know that it takes a real commitment in time and effort and money, and we're not really sure if we can make it work or not. Or maybe we want to do likely to sells. We've heard from a lot of people that they tried it and they don't have a lot of luck. Or Google Leads or anything else like that, Zillow, anything. All these things that we might choose not to do. Sometimes there's an element of fear in there which influenced that particular choice. And so we have to understand that for us to get to where we want to get to, we have to have a relationship with fear that doesn't prevent us from getting there. In other words, we have to somehow get past the fear or through the fear. And this is why everything we want will be on the other side of our fear. So how do we act on this? Well, quite simple. First of all, you need to decide whether you want to focus working on your relationship with fear or not. If you do, you have a chance to shift your life over time. If you don't, you're probably going to be stuck where you are no matter what you're talking about, no matter what business you're in. So if you decide that you want to shift your relationship with fear, you want it to have a different role in your life, you start with that particular mindset. Then you could choose one of the items on the previous slide or another item that you read somewhere that seems to be attractive to you, and ask yourself, what would success look like with that particular item? How could I shift what's happening with me in those particular situations in a way that creates the kind of success that I'm looking for in those situations? Understand what that looks like. And then it's a matter of doing the work to help you get there. It might mean you need to do research on something. It might mean you need to read a book or a couple of articles. There's a million of them out there. There are other people that you could talk with who are professionals in your field or some other field. You could attend a class. There's millions of things that you could do, but this is generally a longer term engagement for you. If you're talking about short term, yes, you need some kind of a mantra or some kind of a band-aid. But if you're talking about shifting your relationship with fear over the long term, you need a more planned and purposeful approach to getting there. And so once you choose to work on one particular thing and you work at it for a month, 2 months, 6 months, whatever it is, you reach some success with that, then you could choose another one. And over time, you can build a toolbox that you can rely on that helps you have that shift in the relationship with fear that allows you to achieve your goals more effectively. Because I can tell you that some people will never, ever achieve their goals because fear is always limiting them. Now, I'd like to pause right here before I take the slides down and just say one thing. For those of you who, let me just ask a question. For those of you who are on the call this morning, if you know that Chirag is also doing the perfect listing presentation right now, did any of you feel a little bit nervous about deciding whether to get on this call or that call? Because if you did, you're experiencing the fear that we're talking about here. So I'm going to have Herson put into the chat the link to the perfect listing presentation, which just started at 9:30. It's going to run through 4:30 today. It's live here in Westport if somebody wants to come by to our Westport office, and it's also online. So Herson, could you please put the link up for that? I'm going to pull this down. So let me ask you, based on what I just said about your relationship with fear and sharing all those words that are some different way of describing the experience of fear, what would you say your relationship with fear is as it currently relates to you and your business? We already heard from Miriam. She says she's not experiencing fear. She doesn't see any risk to any particular risk out there. I'm curious what the others are thinking. What role is fear playing in your management of your business right now? Mo? Can you come off mute?
I'm sorry, forgot about that. Okay.
And Herson, please put that link into the chat. Thank you. Go ahead, Mo.
So I don't have that much of business that this year compared to last year. My business is, a little bit down.
Yep.
But I don't have a fear because I rely on my experience of the past years and see, again, about the business, real estate business we're talking about, not other fears, and I believe, I have a mantra that I don't know, I made it up. I says, there is a solution for every problem. There is one solution. You cannot solve it. That's death. If somebody died or when you die, you cannot do anything about it, honestly. It's just, you're done. But beside that, with the time and energy, money, and all those type of things, there is a solution for every problem. So I think that, how can I fix this? How can I do that? Fear comes to me. I say, okay, you're concerned about this. What can I do about it? So, and sometimes I can, sometimes I consult with people. I can fix it myself. The best thing is really talk to somebody that been there, done that, and then take that advice and work on it. And it's not going to happen overnight, as you mentioned, that I know it, because we want to, result in a day or in a week, but sometimes it won't, especially the thing that is in our head. Type of things, and then you plug it along and you go forward. That's
got it.
as
So
simple as it is.
thank
Yeah.
you. So it sounds like you're relying on two things. One is your experience
Yes.
that tells you that things come and go and that there's good and there's bad and all the things in between. And secondly, this mantra about every problem can be solved except death.
Yes.
Got it. Thank you. I'd like to ask my, thank you for being with us early this morning. What's your perspective on this topic?
Well, I have been self-supporting for more than 50 years. Every day that I have now that I'm working is a bonus. So I'm just then. I am refining my skills. I am decluttering my mind and preparing for the last stretch. This is my home stretch. So I want to have like a firework at the end, but I'm doing it slowly. And I'm digesting everything that you are saying. I'm going to make a plan, and I'm starting my new year today.
Wonderful. It's great. Thanks for sharing that.
Thank you.
I'm curious from anyone, where do you see fear getting in your way of success? What part of your life? What's an example of a situation you faced recently where fear of the situation kind of froze you in your tracks, or made you worried about how to respond or something like that? I'm curious where this comes up for you in your life, in your relationship with a significant other or a family member or somewhere else in your life. Melissa?
For me, it's all the technology. I feel like
Mm,
I'm always relying on Daniel on the team to teach me, and he's so gracious. But I feel like every time I have to put in a new password, I'm not going to remember it, and then I'm not going to get in, and then it's just wasting time. And now with AI and learning AI, and I feel like I'm spinning with the technology because I want to do it, but I'm so anxious about it all the time.
yep, got it. Thank you. So there's one of those words we had, right? Anxious, right? It's a level of fear like, can I do this? I can't do this, or I can't do it as well as I'd like to be able to do it, or something like that. Thank you, Melissa. Who else? Where do you see fear in any form coming up in your life? Miriam?
I have fear when it's fire season. Because I
Fear when
had
it's
to,
fire
I had
season, sure.
10 minutes to get out a few years ago. So that's never left.
Yep, got it. So perfect example, right? And, we talked a few sessions ago about people choosing to do certain things, whether the outcome of those things is certain or uncertain, and present oriented or future oriented. You remember we talked about that a few sessions ago? We were saying that people choose, for example, to not wear a seatbelt because the consequences of that are not necessarily certain, and they're not necessarily immediate. Or people smoke because they might or might not get cancer, and even if they do, it's probably going to happen only after 30 years of smoking. And so those consequences are uncertain and perhaps distant in time. But there's a related piece to that, which is this one. We have the expression in America, once bitten, twice shy. And so certainly if we've experienced a fire, if we've experienced cancer in our family, if we've experienced some other kind of very challenging circumstance, it's no surprise that that experience has an influence on how we think and how we do things in the future. And I'm not here to say that fear is only harmful or a negative influence in our life. Very often the fear that we have spurs us and motivates us to take the right action. Right? There's tons of people who, let's say, didn't take good care of themselves physically. They ate the wrong food or didn't get exercise, and then they went to the doctor, and the doctor said, if you don't do something, you're going to have a heart attack in the next year. And so then they start exercising, they eat better. That's wonderful. In that case, the potential fear is sourcing, let's say, a healthy response. But certainly it makes perfect sense if you've had an experience like Miriam's talking about, which sounds pretty scary to me, 10 minutes. I could understand with that, how that would influence you in the future. The question is, how do we make sure that we're not creating an unhealthy relationship with fear going forward based on any of these experiences? Mo, I'm curious, you seem so it sounds like you have such an effective relationship with fear. I wonder if there are situations where you sometimes experience fear or experience nervousness or anxiousness or any of those words we looked at before. Where do you see that happening in your life?
Really, the things that, like most of us, I want things to be certain, right? And so you do this, you expecting that thing happen, but sometimes we don't. I mean, even whatever, any planning we have in real estate, okay, we call 5 people. You expected, some people call. So living with uncertainty, this is the hardest thing for any human being, including me. I want some sort of not guarantee, but some sort of certainty. So this is, beside that, really, I'm not fearful of, situations that I'm in, again, because another thing that I'm thinking about, I'm not a young chick. So age, but I don't care, because really, I mean, if I die tomorrow, I don't have any regret, because like Maya says, I mean, I work all my life and reach some sort of success, not big success, but some success. And I'm happy with it. And as I'm saying right now, like Maya saying, trying to do it better. So if it get there, fine. If it doesn't get it, the road that I'm in, an association with Chirag and you and, these colleagues, it gives me such a joy and type of thing that I have a good time. So it brings all these level of things much lower. And also I don't dwell on it. I mean, if I'm fearful, I don't stay with it for a day or a week or something like that. And it comes and goes. Maybe I'm forgetful, get some problem here, but I don't, get too much into it. It hits me, but
Got it.
Yeah.
Well, so what I hear what you're saying is, you say when you make 5 calls and you expect something to happen, but you don't know that it'll happen and it's uncertain, right? That can easily create some nervousness or anxiousness. Like, will any of these people call back? Exactly what we're talking about. The stimulus is I made 5 calls and nobody called me back.
Right.
And the thoughts are, oh my gosh, nobody cares about me, or maybe I was too salesy, or maybe they don't like me anymore. I thought they liked me, but maybe they don't. Right. And so the response is you might give up and never call them again.
Yes.
Right? It's no surprise if you have those thoughts and it stimulates a feeling of fear, like, oh, maybe I'm not as well liked by them as I thought, or maybe they didn't value my service as much as I thought. Right. Of course, that questions your own value as a person or as a professional. And it's natural to be a little fearful there, where your own self-concept or your reputation with yourself could be at risk. So thank you, everyone, for thinking a little bit about fear today. I hope you'll continue to think about fear, and I hope that all of you will choose in some way to shift your relationship with fear over time. Because if you can do that, not only will you have the fireworks that Maya is looking for, you'll have the joy and peace along the way that Mo was talking about. So thank you, everybody, this morning. Join us for the rest of the day on the Perfect Listing presentation. If you can, come in at any time between now and 4:30. And I look forward to seeing all of you next Wednesday. Have a great week, everybody.
Bye.